Yunol's life was never loud or dramatic. It was quiet, warm, and simple, the kind of life where happiness didn't need to be questioned. She grew up surrounded by love, protected by parents who made her believe that no matter how cruel the world outside might be, home would always be safe. Her childhood was filled with small routines, shared meals, gentle conversations, familiar laughter that made time feel endless. Back then, Yunol believed this peace was permanent. She never imagined that life could change in a single moment, or that everything she loved could disappear without warning. That belief shattered the day her parents died. There was no slow goodbye, no chance to prepare her heart. One moment they were there, and the next, they were gone. An accident, that was the word people used, as if a single word could explain the emptiness that followed. Yunol was still young, but grief doesn't wait for adulthood. It arrived suddenly and stayed, filling every corner of her life. The house that once felt alive became unbearably quiet. Every room reminded her of voices she would never hear again, of warmth that had vanished overnight. From that day on, Yunol learned what it meant to feel truly alone. After the funeral, the only person left in her world was her grandfather. He became her guardian, her family, and her emotional anchor. To Yunol, he was more than just a relative. He was proof that she hadn't lost everything. She clung to him, and in return, he devoted himself entirely to her. He raised her with patience and care, always worrying about her future, always afraid of what would happen to her if he wasn't there. Yunol grew up faster than she should have, learning to hide her pain behind maturity, convincing herself that independence was strength. But no matter how strong she tried to be, deep down she feared the same loss happening again. Years passed, and Yunol built her life around one quiet promise. As long as her grandfather was alive, she would be okay. She worked hard, avoided emotional attachments, and kept her world small and controlled. Love, to her, felt like a dangerous gamble. She had already lost too much. Trusting someone enough to love them meant giving fate another chance to hurt her. So she focused on responsibility, stability, and survival. She believed that if she stayed careful, life wouldn't take anything else from her. Then came the hospital visit that changed everything. The sterile smell, the serious expressions. The pause before the doctor spoke. Yunol recognized the signs before she even heard the diagnosis. Late-stage cancer. The words echoed in her mind long after they were said aloud. Time was limited. Treatment could slow things down, but it wouldn't stop the inevitable. Once again, Yunol felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. The same fear she had buried for years resurfaced, stronger and sharper. She wasn't ready to lose him. She wasn't ready to be alone again. Her grandfather, however, seemed strangely calm. He accepted his condition with quiet dignity, as if he had already made peace with his fate. But there was one thing he couldn't let go of: his worry for Yunol. To him, her future mattered more than his illness. One day, holding her hand, he shared his final wish. He wanted to see her married. Not because of tradition or appearances, but because he believed marriage would protect her after he was gone. He wanted to know that someone would be there to care for her, to stand beside her, to make sure she wouldn't face the world alone. For Yunol, those words were overwhelming. Marriage was not something she had planned for, not something she even believed in anymore. She didn't have someone she loved, nor did she feel ready to build a life with another person. To her, marriage meant emotional risk, vulnerability, and expectations she didn't know how to meet. The idea of marrying simply to fulfill a wish felt wrong, almost dishonest. Yet the thought of disappointing her grandfather hurt even more. She could see how much this meant to him. In his eyes, this wasn't just a wish, it was his way of finding peace. That night, Yunol couldn't sleep. Her thoughts kept circling the same painful question. Should she sacrifice her own feelings to fulfill someone else's happiness? She knew her grandfather didn't have much time left. Refusing him might mean living with regret for the rest of her life. But agreeing meant stepping into a future she wasn't prepared for. Love had already betrayed her once. She didn't trust it anymore. She didn't trust herself to survive another loss. As dawn approached, Yunol made a decision that would change her life. If marriage was unavoidable, then she would strip it of emotion. She would treat it as a responsibility, not a romance. No love, no expectations, no illusions. Just a temporary arrangement long enough to ease her grandfather's heart. She convinced herself that feelings were unnecessary, that marriage could exist without love. It would be a contract, nothing more. A practical solution to an emotional problem. With that mindset, Yunol began looking for someone who would agree to such an arrangement. She didn't want affection or promises. She wanted distance, boundaries, and clarity. Someone who wouldn't expect love from her and wouldn't offer it either. To Yunol, this was the safest way. If she never allowed her heart to get involved, then she couldn't be hurt. She believed she was protecting herself, even if it meant living a lie for a short time. What Yunol didn't realize was that life rarely respects the rules people set for themselves. The moment she decided to treat marriage as something temporary, fate began preparing to challenge that belief. The choice she thought was simple, the contract she believed would remain emotionless, was already leading her toward something unpredictable. Toward someone she had never planned to meet. Toward feelings she had sworn to avoid. At this point in her life, Yunol still believed she was in control. She thought she had found a way to protect her heart while honoring her grandfather's wish. She believed love would never be part of the equation. But sometimes, the most dangerous lies are the ones we tell ourselves. And Yunol's story was only just beginning. Yunol believed that once she had made her decision, the hardest part was over. She thought choosing marriage as a responsibility instead of a dream would make everything easier. In her mind, emotions could be controlled, rules could be followed, and distance could be maintained. What she didn't expect was how complicated even the first step would be. Finding someone willing to enter a marriage without love was not as simple as she imagined. Every conversation reminded her how different her way of thinking was from everyone else's. People talked about romance, compatibility, and future dreams, while Yunol spoke only about timing and obligation. At first, she turned to someone familiar. Kang had been part of her life for years, someone she trusted enough to speak honestly with. She believed that familiarity might make things less awkward. When she brought up the idea of marriage, she tried to keep her tone casual, almost joking, as if testing the waters. To her surprise, Kang laughed. He thought she was joking too. To him, marriage was something distant and unimportant, something to think about later in life. He dismissed her words without realizing how serious she was. Yunol smiled on the surface, but inside, something cracked. For the first time, she realized how alone she truly was in this decision. That rejection lingered longer than she expected. It wasn't heartbreak in the traditional sense, but it hurt all the same. Yunol wasn't asking for love. she was asking for understanding. Sokun's casual reaction made her feel foolish. As if her situation wasn't important enough to be taken seriously. It confirmed what she had always feared, that no one would ever fully see her struggles the way her grandfather did. After that conversation, Yunol stopped looking for comfort in familiarity. She understood now that this path would have to be walked alone. As days passed, pressure began to build. Her grandfather's health was slowly declining, and with each hospital visit, the urgency grew. He never directly pushed her, but his hopeful smiles and gentle questions were enough. Yunol could feel time slipping away. Every failed attempt made her more desperate. Blind dates felt exhausting and hollow. Men spoke confidently about careers and expectations, but their interest was always conditional. Some were polite, some were arrogant, and some made her feel uncomfortable in ways she couldn't ignore. With every meeting, Yunol felt more convinced that love truly had no place in her life. One evening, after yet another disappointing encounter, Yunol found herself walking alone, overwhelmed by frustration and exhaustion. Her thoughts were scattered, her emotions heavy. She replayed every conversation in her head, wondering if she was asking for something unreasonable. That was when fate intervened in the most unexpected way. In her distracted state, Yunol stepped into the street without paying attention. The sound of brakes and shouted warnings came too late. In the next instant, someone grabbed her and pulled her back. The moment was chaotic, breathless, and disorienting. Yunol felt herself collide with a stranger, her balance lost, her heart racing. For a split second, their faces were too close, close enough that she could feel his breath. It was an accident, clumsy and sudden, but strangely intimate. As they pulled apart, tension filled the space between them. Instead of concern, sharp words followed. The man accused her of being careless. Yunol, still shaken, snapped back, blaming him for startling her. Their first interaction was far from romantic. It was awkward, heated, and memorable. Yunol walked away, annoyed and embarrassed, determined to forget the incident. To her, he was just another stranger in a long day of disappointments. But fate had other plans. Days later, when she entered a lecture hall, she froze. Standing at the front was the same man, the one she had collided with. This time, he wasn't a stranger on the street. He was Kang Junyong, a guest professor and a successful CEO, someone with authority and presence. The realization made Yunol uncomfortable. She hadn't just argued with a random passerby. She had confronted someone powerful. Junyong recognized her too. His expression shifted subtly, a mix of amusement and curiosity. Their eyes met, and the tension from their first encounter resurfaced. Throughout the lecture, Yunol struggled to focus. She could feel his gaze occasionally linger on her, as if trying to understand who she was. To him, Yunol was intriguing, direct, unafraid, and unexpectedly honest. Unlike others who treated him with excessive respect, she had argued with him without hesitation. Despite her discomfort, Yunol tried to ignore him. She reminded herself that her life had no room for distractions. Marriage, her grandfather, and responsibility were all that mattered. Yet, Junyong kept appearing in her orbit, always at unexpected moments. Their conversations were brief but sharp, filled with tension and unspoken challenges. He teased her bluntness, and she criticized his arrogance. Neither of them backed down. There was no softness between them, no romantic undertone, only friction. What Yunol didn't know was that Junyong was watching her more closely than she realized. He noticed her exhaustion, her guarded expressions, the way she carried herself as if she were constantly bracing for impact. Unlike others who sought his attention, Yunol avoided it. That alone made her stand out. To Junyong, who was used to control and predictability, her unpredictability was fascinating. Meanwhile, Yunol's situation grew more desperate. Her grandfather's condition worsened, and the fear of losing him became unbearable. Every time he smiled at her, hopeful and trusting, guilt tightened around her heart. She felt trapped between honesty and obligation. She had promised herself she would fulfill his wish, yet she was running out of options. The idea of a contract marriage began to feel less like a plan and more like a necessity. The breaking point came after another disastrous blind date. What started as an awkward dinner turned uncomfortable when the man's behavior crossed a line. Yunol felt unsafe, cornered, and humiliated. Before she could react, Junyong appeared. His presence was commanding, his voice calm but firm. He intervened without hesitation, shutting the situation down and walking Yunol away. For the first time, Yunol felt relief instead of embarrassment. That night, emotions she had suppressed for weeks finally surfaced. Yunol confessed more than she intended to. She spoke about her grandfather, about the pressure she felt, and about her belief that marriage didn't need love. She admitted she wasn't searching for happiness, only stability. Junyong listened quietly. He didn't interrupt or judge her. Instead, he asked a simple question: why she was willing to sacrifice so much for someone else's peace. In that moment, something shifted. Junyong saw Yunol not as a reckless woman or a stubborn student, but as someone carrying a heavy burden alone. And Yunol saw Junyong not as an arrogant stranger, but as someone who understood silence and restraint. The tension between them softened, replaced by something more complex. Then Yunol said something Yunol never expected. He suggested a contract marriage. No love, no emotional obligation. Just a mutually beneficial agreement. His proposal was direct, almost businesslike, yet it offered exactly what Yunol needed: stability, boundaries, and time. Yunol was stunned. She had been searching for a solution, and suddenly, it was standing right in front of her. She didn't answer immediately. Doubt and disbelief filled her mind. Could it really be that simple? Could she trust someone she barely knew? But as she looked at Junyong, she realized something unsettling. This man understood her logic. He wasn't offering romance. He was offering a deal. As Yunol considered his words, she had no idea that this decision, this agreement she believed would remain temporary, was about to change everything. The contract she was about to sign would not protect her heart the way she hoped. Instead, it would bring her closer to the one thing she feared most: real, uncontrollable feelings. Yunol never believed in destiny. To her, life was a series of choices, and every consequence was the result of a decision she made herself. That belief was the only thing that kept her grounded. But ever since Kang proposed a contract marriage, her sense of control began to slip. His words stayed with her longer than she wanted to admit. The idea was logical, almost perfect. No love, no expectations, and no emotional risks. It was everything she had convinced herself she needed, and yet, something about it unsettled her. She tried to ignore him at first. Days passed, and Yunol focused on her routine, on hospital visits, and on caring for her grandfather. Each time she looked at him, frailer than before but still smiling with quiet hope, The weight of her hesitation grew heavier. She reminded herself why she needed this arrangement. This wasn't about happiness. It was about responsibility. It was about making sure the person who raised her could leave this world without worry. When Yunol finally agreed to meet Junyong again, she told herself it was only to clarify the details. She insisted on rules, clear boundaries, no emotional involvement, and a fixed duration. Junyong listened calmly, almost amused by how carefully she spoke. He didn't argue or push back. Instead, he agreed to every condition, which only made Yunol more uneasy. People usually negotiated. Junyong didn't. It was as if he had already decided that this arrangement would happen. As they discussed the contract, Yunol couldn't ignore the subtle changes in their interactions. Junyong was observant, noticing things she hadn't meant to reveal: her habit of pausing before answering personal questions, the way her voice softened when she spoke about her grandfather, the tension in her posture whenever emotions came close to the surface. He didn't comment on any of it, but his awareness made Yunol feel exposed. Despite her doubts, Yunol signed the agreement. The moment the pen left the paper, a strange sense of finality settled over her. She told herself it was temporary, just long enough to fulfill her grandfather's wish. After that, everything would go back to normal. Or at least, that was what she believed. The days that followed were filled with adjustments. Yunol and Junyong began spending time together, not as lovers, but as partners, preparing to play convincing roles. They practiced conversations, discussed family expectations, and learned just enough about each other to avoid suspicion. To Yunol's surprise, Junyong was patient. He didn't rush her or mock her discomfort. He treated the arrangement with the seriousness of a business deal, which reassured her. Yet, the more time they spent together, the harder it became to maintain emotional distance. Junyong was different from the men Yunol had met before. He wasn't loud or demanding. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, his words carried intention. Yunol found herself relaxing around him without meaning to. Their conversations extended beyond logistics, drifting into shared observations and quiet moments of understanding. Each time that happened, Yunol quickly pulled back, reminding herself of the rules. Junyong noticed her hesitation but chose not to confront it. He understood restraint well. He had built his life around control, discipline, and emotional distance. To him, the contract was convenient. It solved his own problems without forcing him into unnecessary attachments. At least, that was what he told himself. What he didn't expect was how often his thoughts drifted back to Yunol when she wasn't around. The first time Yunol met Junyong's family, she felt the weight of the situation fully settle in. Every smile she offered, every polite response, felt like a performance. She was constantly aware of the lie she was living. But Junyong stayed close, subtly guiding her through conversations, stepping in whenever pressure rose. To outsiders, they looked natural, comfortable, even affectionate. Yunol hated how convincing it all felt. Later that evening, as they were alone, Yunol confronted Junyong about how easily he played his role. She accused him of treating the marriage too casually. Junyong responded with calm honesty. He told her that emotions only complicated things, and that maintaining distance was the best way to avoid mistakes. His words echoed Yunol's own beliefs, yet hearing them from him stirred something unexpected within her. A sense of loneliness she hadn't acknowledged before. As weeks passed, the line between performance and reality continued to blur. Yunol found herself noticing small details how Junyong remembered her preferences, how he adjusted his pace to match hers, how he always made sure she was comfortable before himself. These gestures were subtle, easy to dismiss as courtesy. But Yunol couldn't ignore how they made her feel. Safe, seen, and that frightened her more than anything else. She tried to reinforce the boundaries, reminding Junyong and herself that this was only an agreement. Junyong accepted her words without protest, but his silence spoke volumes. There were moments when Yunol caught him watching her, his expression unreadable. In those moments, she felt a strange tension, as if something unspoken hovered between them. The turning point came during a quiet evening when Yunol received a call from the hospital. Her grandfather's condition had worsened. Panic gripped her, and without thinking, she turned to Junyong. He didn't ask questions or hesitate. He simply drove her to the hospital and stayed by her side. Watching him interact gently with her grandfather, Yunol felt her resolve weaken. The man she had chosen for convenience was becoming someone she relied on emotionally. That night, Yunol realized the danger of the situation. The contract was no longer just a contract. It was creating space for feelings she had tried so hard to avoid. She told herself that she needed to stay alert, to protect her heart. But emotions aren't easily controlled, especially when they grow quietly, without permission. Junyong, too, felt the shift. He had entered the agreement with clarity and confidence, believing he could maintain distance. But Yunol's vulnerability challenged that belief. He admired her strength, her sense of responsibility, and her quiet resilience. Each time she trusted him, even unknowingly, it chipped away at the emotional walls he had built. Neither of them said it out loud, but both sensed the same truth. The contract marriage was no longer just a solution. It was becoming a risk. And as they continued walking this path together, the question wasn't whether feelings would emerge, was whether either of them would be brave enough to face them. The foundation had been laid. The agreement was signed. The roles were set. But beneath the surface, something real was forming, something neither of them could fully control. And as Yunol and Junyong moved forward, pretending everything was temporary, their hearts were already preparing for something permanent. Yunol began to realize that pretending was far more exhausting than she had imagined. Every day she woke up reminding herself that this marriage was temporary, that none of it was real, yet her heart refused to follow those rules. Living under the same roof with Junyong changed everything. The quiet mornings, the shared meals, the small routines that formed naturally between them, slowly chipped away at her emotional defenses. What scared her most was how normal it all felt. Junyong noticed the change in her too. Yunol had always kept a careful distance, but lately she lingered longer in shared spaces, spoke more freely, and occasionally forgot to maintain her guarded tone. These moments were fleeting, but they stayed with him. He found himself looking forward to seeing her reactions, her subtle smiles, and even her silences. It unsettled him. This arrangement was supposed to be simple, controlled, yet something was slipping out of his grasp. One evening, after a long day, Yunol collapsed onto the couch, exhaustion evident in her posture. Junyong watched her quietly, noticing how pale she looked. He asked if she was feeling unwell, and she brushed it off, insisting she was just tired. But when she stood up, she swayed slightly. Before she could fall, Junyong caught her. The closeness startled them both. For a brief moment, neither moved. Yunol could feel his heartbeat through his chest, steady and strong, grounding her in a way she hadn't felt in years. She quickly pulled away, embarrassed, apologizing repeatedly. Junyong told her she didn't need to apologize, his voice softer than usual. That night, neither of them slept well. The tension between them lingered, heavy and unspoken. As days passed, Yunol's grandfather insisted on spending more time with them together. Seeing Yunol smile again brought him comfort, and he often thanked Yunol for taking care of her. Each word of gratitude felt like a reminder of the lie they were living. Yunol smiled through it, but guilt gnawed at her. She wondered what would happen if her grandfather ever learned the truth. Junyong, on the other hand, felt conflicted. Watching Yunol with her grandfather stirred something deep within him. He admired her devotion, her willingness to sacrifice her own happiness for someone she loved. It made him question his own motivations. What had started as a practical solution was becoming something far more complicated. The first real argument between them happened unexpectedly. Yunol overheard Junyong discussing business late at night, his tone cold and detached. She realized how little she truly knew about his world. The realization made her feel like an outsider in her own marriage. When she confronted him, her emotions surprised even herself. She accused him of shutting her out and treating their relationship like a transaction. Junyong didn't deny it. Instead, he asked her why it bothered her so much, if it was only a contract. The question struck deep. Yunol struggled to answer, her voice trembling as she insisted it was about respect, not feelings. But the way her eyes avoided his gaze told a different story. The argument ended unresolved, leaving both of them unsettled. For the first time since the marriage began, distance grew between them. Yunol retreated into herself, keeping conversations short and formal. Junyong respected her space, but the silence weighed heavily on him. He realized he missed her presence more than he was willing to admit. Things shifted again when Yunol's grandfather collapsed and was rushed to the hospital. Fear consumed her as doctors explained the seriousness of his condition. Junyong arrived quickly, staying by her side through every update, every anxious moment. When Yunol finally broke down, crying quietly in the hallway, Junyong didn't hesitate. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as she shook with grief and fear. In that moment, the contract didn't matter. Titles didn't matter. All that existed was the comfort they gave each other. Yunol clung to him, her tears soaking into his shirt, and Junyong felt his own resolve crumble. He realized that somewhere along the way, he had stopped pretending. His concern for her was real. His feelings were real. After her grandfather stabilized, Yunol apologized for the argument, blaming stress and exhaustion. Yunol accepted her apology but admitted something he had never said before. He told her that he wasn't good at expressing emotions, that he had learned early in life to suppress them. He warned her that caring too deeply only led to pain. Yunol listened quietly, understanding more than he expected. She confessed that she had always believed love was a weakness, something that distracted people from their responsibilities. That belief had shaped her life, guiding every decision she made. But now, she wasn't so sure anymore. Saying those words out loud terrified her, but it also felt freeing. Despite the emotional closeness, neither of them crossed the final line. They returned to their routines, but something had changed. The air between them felt charged, filled with things left unsaid. Every glance lingered a little longer. Every touch carried more meaning. They were both aware of it, yet neither dared to acknowledge it fully. Junyong's family began to notice the shift. They commented on how natural Yunol seemed, how well she fit into Junyong's life. Yunol smiled politely, but inside, anxiety grew. The more convincing their marriage appeared, the harder it would be to walk away when the contract ended. Late one night, Yunol found the contract tucked away in a drawer. She stared at the expiration date, realizing how close it was. Panic washed over her. She had spent so much time focused on surviving, on fulfilling obligations, that she hadn't prepared herself for the end. The thought of leaving Junyong felt unbearable, yet the idea of staying frightened her just as much. Junyong, too, found himself thinking about the contract more often. What had once been a safety net now felt like a countdown. He questioned whether he wanted this to end at all. But pride and fear held him back. Admitting his feelings meant risking rejection, and he had never been good at taking emotional risks. The night before the contract's renewal discussion, Yunol and Junyong sat together in silence. The tension was undeniable. Both knew that the next conversation would change everything. Either they would walk away, pretending none of it mattered, or they would face the truth they had been avoiding. Neither spoke. But in the quiet, their hearts were louder than words. What had begun as a temporary arrangement had quietly evolved into something fragile, something precious. And as the expiration date approached, both Yunol and Junyong stood on the edge of a decision that would determine whether their love remained a secret or became something real. The days leading up to the contract's expiration were filled with an unbearable tension neither of them could escape. Yunol tried to act normal, but her mind constantly returned to the same question: what happens when this ends? Every time she looked at Junyong, the thought tightened her chest. The warmth they had built together now felt fragile, as if one wrong word could shatter it completely. Junyong was struggling just as much, though he hid it better. Outwardly, he remained calm and composed, focused on work, meetings, and responsibilities. But inside, his thoughts were in chaos. He had spent his entire life avoiding emotional attachments, convincing himself that control was safety. Now, Yunol had quietly dismantled that belief without even trying. One evening, Yunol finally gathered the courage to bring up the contract. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she asked what his plans were once it ended. Junyong paused longer than usual before answering. He told her they would discuss it when the time came, his tone neutral and distant. The response hurt more than she expected. It felt like confirmation that, to him, this was still just an arrangement. That night, Yunol lay awake, replaying his words over and over. She realized she had fallen in love somewhere along the way, slowly and without permission. Admitting it to herself was terrifying. Loving him meant risking heartbreak, humiliation, and loss. But pretending she felt nothing was becoming impossible. The next day, Yunol's grandfather noticed her distraction. He gently asked if she was unhappy. Unable to lie to him, she admitted she was confused about her future. Her grandfather smiled sadly and told her that love was never simple, but running from it only created deeper regrets. His words stayed with her long after she left. Meanwhile, Junyong received pressure from his family. They hinted at renewing the contract publicly, turning the temporary marriage into something permanent for business stability. The suggestion unsettled him. The idea of continuing the lie felt wrong now, but so did ending it. For the first time, he realized he didn't want Yunol because of obligation or strategy. He wanted her because she mattered. That realization frightened him. As the expiration date drew closer, Junyong began pulling away. He limited conversations, avoided shared meals, and stayed out late under the excuse of work. Yunol felt the distance immediately. The silence between them became painful, filled with unspoken fears. She wondered if he was already preparing to leave. Unable to endure it anymore, Yunol decided to confess. She told herself she needed closure, even if it meant rejection. One evening, she waited for him in the living room, her heart racing with every sound. When Junyong finally arrived, she stood up and asked him directly if their marriage meant anything to him at all. Junyong froze. The question struck deeper than he expected. For a moment, he considered telling the truth. He wanted to say that she had changed him, that she made him feel alive, that losing her terrified him. But years of emotional restraint held him back. Instead, he answered carefully, saying that their agreement had served its purpose, and that emotions only complicated things. The words cut Yunol like a blade. She nodded, forcing a smile, and apologized for asking something inappropriate. Without another word, she left the room. Junyong watched her go, guilt weighing heavily on him. He knew he had hurt her, but fear kept him silent. He told himself it was better this way. Ending it cleanly would spare them both more pain. Yunol spent the night packing. Each item she placed into her suitcase felt like a farewell to a life she wasn't ready to lose. Memories flooded her mind. Quiet breakfasts, late-night conversations, moments of comfort she had never expected to find. By morning, her resolve wavered, but pride wouldn't allow her to stay. When Junyong discovered her packed suitcase, panic surged through him. He asked where she was going, his voice sharper than he intended. Yunol calmly told him she would leave once the contract officially ended. She said it was the logical choice, her tone distant and controlled, even though her eyes betrayed her pain. For the first time, Junyong felt like he was truly losing her. He tried to convince himself this was the right outcome. He had always believed love weakened people, made them vulnerable. But watching Yunol prepare to walk away, he realized that avoiding love didn't make him stronger. It only made him lonely. Still, he said nothing. The situation reached its breaking point when Yunol overheard a phone conversation meant to be private. She heard Junyong discussing the contract renewal with his family, his voice tense and conflicted. The fragments she caught painted a picture she hadn't expected. He wasn't indifferent. He was torn. Confusion and hope collided within her. Later that day, Yunol confronted him again, demanding honesty. She told him she couldn't live in uncertainty anymore. Either they faced their feelings, or she would leave without looking back. Her voice trembled, but her resolve was firm. She had spent her life sacrificing her own emotions. She refused to do it again. Junyong struggled to respond. Every instinct urged him to retreat, to protect himself behind emotional walls. But Yunol's courage forced him to confront the truth. He admitted that he was afraid of caring too much, afraid of losing control, afraid that if he allowed himself to love her, it would destroy him. Yunol listened quietly, tears forming in her eyes. She told him that love was always a risk, but avoiding it was a loss she wasn't willing to accept. She confessed her feelings openly, without excuses or conditions. She told him she loved him, not because of the contract, but despite it. The confession shook Junyong to his core. For a moment, it seemed like he might finally give in. But fear won. He told her he couldn't return her feelings. at least not now. He said it was better to end things before they hurt each other even more. The words sounded hollow even to him. Yunol didn't argue. She simply nodded, accepting the rejection with quiet dignity. That night, she finalized her decision to leave. As the contract's final day arrived, both of them stood on opposite sides of the same truth. What had started as a temporary agreement had grown into something neither was prepared to face. And now, with love laid bare and unanswered, the consequences of their choices loomed closer than ever. What neither of them knew was that this ending was only the beginning of a far more painful truth waiting to be revealed. The morning the contract ended was heavy with silence. Yunol woke early, the sunlight streaming through the curtains, feeling sharper than usual. She moved quietly, careful not to disturb Junyong, though he was already awake, seated at the breakfast table with his usual composed posture. But the composure was an illusion. For a moment, they exchanged a glance loaded brief and hauntingly meaningful. Neither spoke, each struggling with the knowledge that this was no ordinary morning. It marked the day everything would change. Yunol packed the last of her belongings, the zippers and rustle of clothes sounding louder than they should have. Each sound echoed in Junyong's mind, gnawing at him in ways words never could. He tried to focus on his coffee, pretending it was just a regular day, but his attention constantly drifted to the suitcase, to the possibility of her absence, to the void her departure would leave. He could almost feel the air thickening between them. A suffocating weight neither could ignore. Finally, Yunol closed the suitcase, placed the lock, and faced him. Her expression was composed, but her eyes glimmered with unshed tears. She said goodbye in the quietest way possible, her voice barely above a whisper. Junyong felt as though the room itself had contracted around him, pressing down with the magnitude of what he was about to lose. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Words failed him, as they always did when emotion overwhelmed logic. The drive to the airport, or, more accurately, the distance to wherever she intended to go, was tense. Yunol avoided conversation, staring out of the window at passing scenery with a forced detachment. Junyong, on the other hand, wrestled with thoughts and emotions he had spent years suppressing. He realized, painfully, that this wasn't about the contract, about business, or about appearances. It was about Yunol, about what she meant to him, and the life he had been too afraid to live. The recognition struck him like lightning. He couldn't let her go, not really. Fear of vulnerability, fear of rejection, fear of losing control. He weighed his options, each one heavier than the last. He knew he could stop her, say something, do something. Anything to hold her back, but then he worried it would seem desperate, controlling, or even foolish. Pride and insecurity battled inside him, a war between the man he had always been and the man he wished he could allow himself to become. Even in silence, she felt the emotional pull tugging him in directions he refused to acknowledge. It frustrated her, hurt her, but also made her heart ache with a strange, unspoken hope. Somewhere deep inside, she knew he cared. She could see it in the slight tremor of his fingers, the subtle tightening of his jaw, the way he avoided her gaze. But hope without action was cruel, and she refused to be subject to that cruelty. That morning, she made her final decision. She would leave. As she approached the door, Junyong finally spoke. The words were halting, fragmented, as though they were unfamiliar to him. He asked her if she was sure, if this was truly what she wanted. His voice, low and rough, carried an emotional weight that she hadn't heard before. Anel turned, meeting his gaze squarely, and confirmed her choice. She told him that she had loved him in secret for longer than she realized, but that love could not anchor itself in uncertainty. It deserved clarity. It deserved honesty. He wanted to reach out, to stop her. He wanted to tell her that he had never been indifferent. But as always, his fear intervened. He hesitated, torn between action and inaction. The moment the sunlight touched her face, Junyong felt a wave of loss he had never known. She paused, as if sensing his inner turmoil, and looked back once more. Her eyes glistened with a mixture of pain and courage. "Goodbye, Junyong," she whispered, and just like that, she was gone. The apartment felt emptier instantly. He walked from room to room, as though her absence had left physical holes in the space she had occupied. The coffee sat half-finished, the suitcase absent, the air lighter yet heavier, all at once. He realized, with agonizing clarity, that he had lost more than a companion. He had lost the possibility of love. In the days that followed, Junyong tried to maintain normalcy, but everything reminded him of her. The small routines they had shared, morning coffee, evening walks, laughter over trivial jokes replayed in his mind with painful clarity. He found himself pacing late at night, questioning every choice, every word, every gesture. He understood, too late, that the contract had never been the boundary he thought it was. The real boundary had been his own fear. Meanwhile, Yunol adjusted to her new environment with a heavy heart. The city was unfamiliar, the streets unkindly crowded, the nights too quiet. She forced herself to work, to eat, to sleep. She wrote letters she never sent, replayed conversations, questioned her choices. Did she do the right thing by leaving? Could she have forced him to confront his feelings sooner? Was love truly worth the pain? The truth, however, was unavoidable. Both of them had changed. What started as a business arrangement had grown into something far more profound. Both had discovered vulnerabilities, desires, and emotions they could no longer ignore. The emotional scars were raw, but they were also a testament to the depth of what they had shared. Then came the unexpected. It didn't say much, only asking if they could meet. Yunol's heart raced. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to protect herself from the inevitable heartbreak. But another part, stronger and more persistent, knew she had to face it. When they finally met, the tension was palpable. Yunol noticed the subtle changes in him, the slight slump in his shoulders, the uncharacteristic softness in his eyes. Junyong noticed her courage, the quiet strength in her stance, the resilience she had cultivated since leaving. They were different, changed by separation. His words came slowly, but they were earnest. He admitted that leaving her had been the hardest thing he had ever done. He confessed that every day without her had been a battle between regret and longing. He told her that he understood now what love truly meant. Not control. She had anticipated many outcomes. Her heart ached, yet it also swelled with the hope she had quietly nurtured. For the first time since leaving, she felt the possibility of reconciliation. He took a shaky breath and asked if she would give him another chance. Not because of obligation, not because of a contract, but because he genuinely wanted to be with her. He wanted to fight for her, to fight for them, despite the risk, despite the fear. Yunol's response was cautious, yet tender. She told him that trust had to be rebuilt, that hearts couldn't simply forget pain. But beneath her caution, there was undeniable relief, joy, and longing. She wanted to believe in him, in them, more than anything. As they slowly began to navigate the treacherous path back toward each other, Every word, every touch, every gesture carried weight. But for the first time, they were no longer bound by contracts or obligations. They were bound by something far stronger: choice, understanding, and a love hard-earned through separation, struggle, and revelation. The chapter of endings had closed. Days passed like slow-moving storms, heavy with tension and the unspoken promise of something new. Junyong and Yunol met cautiously at first, their conversations brief, measured, almost fragile. Every word was chosen with care, as if one wrong phrase could shatter the fragile bridge they were trying to rebuild. Yet even in their careful exchanges, a spark lingered, an electric undercurrent neither could ignore. It was a delicate dance, a negotiation between desire and fear, between past regrets and future possibilities. They started small. Nothing grand, nothing extravagant, just time spent together in the quiet spaces where hearts could speak without pretense. Yunol noticed the subtle changes in Junyong. He laughed more easily now. His eyes softened when they met hers, no longer hidden behind layers of composure. And Junyong, in turn, noticed Yunol's strength. She had grown in ways he hadn't expected. One evening, they found themselves sitting in a small, dimly lit cafe. The hum of the city around them almost distant, almost irrelevant. Yunol stirred her coffee slowly, her gaze fixed somewhere between thought and memory. Junyong reached across the table, his hand hovering just above hers. For a moment, time seemed to hold its breath. Then, carefully, he touched her hand. It was a simple gesture, yet it carried the weight of countless unspoken emotions. Yunol didn't pull away. She let the warmth of his hand meet hers, and for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to relax, if only slightly. They spoke about mundane things at first: work, the weather, trivial events of the day, but beneath the surface, every sentence was a subtle test, a probing of boundaries. Both were learning the art of communication anew, discovering how to express what had been suppressed for so long. And then, slowly, they began to speak of the past, of regrets, of misunderstandings, of moments lost and lessons learned. These conversations were not easy. Tears were shed, voices cracked, hearts bled in ways words could scarcely capture. Yet through it all, an undeniable truth emerged. Their connection had never truly broken. It had only been buried under layers of fear, pride, and circumstance. One rainy afternoon, Junyong suggested a walk. Yunol hesitated, but followed. The streets glistened with rain, reflecting neon signs and streetlights in fractured patterns that seemed almost surreal. They walked in silence for a while, the sound of rain and distant traffic creating a private cocoon. And then, without warning, Junyong stopped. He looked at Yunol with an intensity that made her stomach tighten. "I've realized something," he said softly, almost as if afraid to shatter the moment. "I've been afraid of losing you my entire life, not just when you left. I was scared of admitting what I felt, scared of failing, scared of being vulnerable. But I can't be afraid anymore." She had imagined this moment countless times, yet the reality was far more intense than anything she had anticipated. She wanted to speak, to assure him, to tell him she felt the same, but words were fragile, fleeting, insufficient. Instead, she reached for his hand, letting her fingers intertwine with his. The touch was electric, a confirmation of everything they had been too timid to acknowledge. From that day, their reunion deepened. They spent hours talking, sometimes laughing, sometimes sitting in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that only comes from understanding. They discovered shared interests they hadn't explored before, hobbies and passions that became bridges between their hearts. Yunol introduced Junyong to the subtle joys of quiet mornings. The thrill of discovering new music, the small satisfaction of creating something with her own hands. Junyong, in turn, showed Yunol the excitement of spontaneity, the freedom in taking risks, and the beauty of surrendering control, just enough to let life surprise you. Yet the path was not without obstacles. Old fears and insecurities still surfaced, sometimes unexpectedly. Junyong struggled with trust, haunted by the guilt of his past hesitation and by the possibility of losing her again. Yunol grappled with vulnerability, terrified that opening herself fully might invite heartbreak. But with every challenge, they learned to communicate more deeply, to confront uncomfortable truths, and to lean on one another in ways they never had before. Each conflict, each tear, each difficult conversation became a stepping stone toward a stronger, more resilient bond. There were moments of unexpected joy, too. A spontaneous weekend getaway led to laughter that echoed through empty streets, shared meals that became intimate rituals, quiet nights spent talking under the stars. In these moments, they discovered not just love, but companionship, friendship, and a profound sense of belonging. Junyong began to understand that love was not about possession or control, it was about presence, trust, and shared growth. Yunol realized that love could be safe, that vulnerability could be strength, and that opening her heart again was not a mistake but a choice. Then came the day Junyong invited Yunol to his apartment, not for business, not for pretense, but simply to be together. The walls, once cold and formal, now felt warm with their laughter, their conversation, and the quiet intimacy of shared space. They cooked together, a chaotic, messy affair that ended in flower-covered laughter and stolen kisses. They danced in the living room to music neither of them particularly liked. Yet the moment was perfect, because it was theirs. Each gesture, each touch, each glance reinforced the fragile yet unbreakable bond they were rebuilding. As weeks turned into months, their relationship evolved into something neither had expected. The initial intensity of reunion gave way to a deeper, steadier love, one that didn't demand perfection, one that accepted flaws and celebrated growth. They faced challenges together, sometimes stumbling, sometimes faltering, but always reaching for each other in the end. They learned that love was not a singular event or a grand gesture, but a series of choices, repeated every day, to care, to understand. One evening, as they watched the sun set from a quiet rooftop, not in terms of contracts, obligations, or he spoke of trips they could take, projects they could pursue together, and the possibility of building a life that honored both their independence and their connection. Yunol listened, her heart swelling with hope and certainty. She realized that what they had was rare, fragile, and extraordinary, and that it deserved to be nurtured with care, patience, and commitment. The story of their reconciliation was not one of instant resolution or fairy tale perfection. It was messy, complicated, and profoundly human. It involved mistakes, apologies, and a constant negotiation of boundaries and expectations. Yet through it all, one truth remained unwavering. They had chosen each other, not out of convenience or obligation, but out of genuine love, respect, and understanding. That choice, repeated daily, became the foundation of a relationship stronger than any contract, more resilient than any fear, and more enduring than any obstacle. And so, in the quiet moments between laughter and conversation, Junyong and Yunol discovered the true meaning of connection. It was not found in words alone. It was found in presence, in vulnerability. They learned that love, when nurtured with honesty and courage, in the end, what began as a cautious reunion blossomed into a profound partnership, one that balanced freedom and commitment, passion and understanding. Each day brought new lessons, new challenges, and new opportunities to grow together, filled with the inevitable trials of life, but as a united pair, strengthened by shared experience and the unshakable bond of choice, trust, and love. The chapter of discovery and commitment had begun. And in that chapter, every heartbeat, every glance, and every moment mattered, because they were no longer just surviving circumstances or guarding emotions. They were living, truly and completely, together. The days that followed were different, lighter, warmer, and full of the quiet satisfaction that comes from being truly seen and understood. Junyong and Yunol had settled into a rhythm, a dance of sorts, where each knew when to lead and when to follow, when to speak and when to listen. Their mornings were no longer rushed or filled with silent tension. Instead, they began with gentle rituals, coffee brewed just the way they liked it, soft music filling the kitchen. These small moments, so ordinary on the surface. Work continued to be demanding, yet, even amid stress and obligations, texts full of inside jokes, each interaction reminded them that love was not confined to grand declarations or dramatic moments. It thrived in consistency, attention, and care. Junyong learned to slow down. Yunol, in turn, embraced vulnerability. One evening, they decided to take a spontaneous trip to a quiet lakeside town. Neither had made detailed plans. The journey itself became a lesson in trust and adaptability. A wrong turn led them to an abandoned pier where they watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. They spoke of dreams long forgotten. By the time night fell, it was during these unscripted moments that they realized love could be spontaneous. During their stay, they explored the small town on foot, taking in its charm and simplicity. Yunol discovered a tiny bookshop tucked between two cafes, and Junyong watched with amusement as she lingered among the shelves, her eyes lighting up at every new find. He began to understand that these were the pieces of life she cherished, the small joys, the little discoveries, the slow and steady accumulation of experiences that shaped her. And he wanted to be part of all of it, not as a bystander but as a partner, equally invested in the beauty of ordinary days. One rainy afternoon, they took shelter under the awning of a quaint bakery, watching people rush past, umbrellas held high. Yunol reached for Yunol's hand once again, fingers intertwining naturally, and said, "I never realized how much I missed moments like this. Just being with someone, without pretense, without complication." Yunol smiled, a slow, soft curve of lips that reached her eyes. "And I'm glad it's you. I get to share it with Nell." There was no hesitation, no fear, just an honesty so profound it left them both momentarily speechless. In the quiet hours, when the world outside was still, they talked about everything: the past, the present, and the future. They shared fears that had long been buried, but they also shared laughter, teasing remarks, and spontaneous plans that reminded them of the joy in togetherness. It was in these moments, free from distraction, that they realized the depth of their connection, the unspoken understanding that had taken months to cultivate. Yet, despite the calm and happiness, life reminded them that love was never without challenge. An unexpected family obligation drew Junyong back to the city. Distance, even brief, tested their patience and trust. Messages went unanswered at times due to work, and minor misunderstandings flared briefly. But instead of creating fissures, these moments became opportunities to strengthen their bond. They learned to communicate more effectively, to express concern without blame. Every obstacle reinforced the fact that their relationship was built on more than attraction. It was built on respect, understanding, and commitment. As their vacation came to an end, they took a long walk along the lakeshore, the water reflecting the waning light of day. Junyong stopped, turning to face Yunol, and said, "Not because it's easy, but because it's worth it. You're worth it." Yunol's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and she reached out to touch his face, feeling the warmth and steadiness there. Every step, every challenge, every quiet morning, with you. And in that shared promise, unspoken but understood, they discovered a rare sense of completeness, a harmony that transcended words and rooted itself firmly in trust and love. Back in the city, life resumed its usual rhythm, but neither Junyong nor Yunol allowed the magic of their vacation to fade. They applied the lessons they had learned, the importance of small joys. Their home became a sanctuary. Work pressures and external stressors continued, but they faced them together, fortified by the intimacy and understanding they had cultivated. And then came a moment neither had anticipated. The offer was significant, a potential turning point in his career, but it also posed a challenge to their relationship. Yunol watched him wrestle with the decision, noticing the conflict etched across his face. Finally, Junyong turned to her and said, "I don't want to lose this us, over distance or timing. I want to take the opportunity, but I need you with me. Can we do this together?" Yunol's heart raced. She understood the risk, the potential for strain, but she also understood the strength of what they had built. "We can," she said firmly. The weeks that followed were a test of patience and adaptability. Video calls replaced morning coffee, texts replaced casual afternoon check-ins, and shared experiences became intentional rather than incidental. The distance was difficult, sometimes painful, but it also reinforced the resilience of their connection. They discovered that love was not weakened by absence, but often strengthened by the conscious effort to maintain it. Every phone call, every message, every shared moment, no matter how brief, was a deliberate act of commitment. During this period, they also faced moments of doubt and fear. Nights spent apart brought insecurities to the surface. What if the excitement faded? What if the excitement faded? But each time, they confronted these fears openly, more confident in their shared commitment, and more appreciative of the bond they had nurtured. Finally, after months of careful balancing between careers and relationship, Junyong returned permanently, ready to rejoin Yunol, without the shadow of uncertainty. Their reunion was quiet, yet profoundly moving, a recognition of the trials they had endured and the growth they had achieved together. It was not dramatic or flamboyant, but it carried the weight of months spent nurturing trust, resilience, and love. They realized that true partnership was not about avoiding hardship, but about facing it together, hand in hand, hearts aligned. From that day onward, Junyong and Yunol entered a new phase of their relationship. They no longer measured their love in grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Instead, they measured it in presence, in attentiveness, and in the shared commitment to weather life's storms together. Every morning, every conversation, Every quiet evening became an affirmation of their choice to stay, to trust, and to love one another deeply. And so, the story of Junyong and Yunol unfolded an intricate tapestry of reunion, growth, and enduring love. It was not a story of perfection, but of authenticity. And in its imperfect beauty, it revealed a profound truth. Love is not simply a feeling, but a series of choices, repeated daily, that define the depth, resilience. The city had changed while Junyong was away. The streets seemed busier, the air heavier, and yet, somehow, quieter without him by her side. Yunol found herself noticing the small things she had taken for granted, the way sunlight hit the apartment in the mornings, the smell of freshly brewed coffee, the way the wind carried distant laughter from the street below. But now, with Junyong returning, all of it felt richer, more vivid, charged with a sense of anticipation she hadn't felt in months. The very thought of seeing him again made her heart race, her mind replaying memories of shared laughter, quiet conversations, and the unspoken intimacy that had grown between them. Their reunion was not dramatic, but profoundly emotional. Junyong appeared at the airport, carrying a single suitcase, his eyes scanning the crowd until they found her. Junol's breath caught, her body frozen for a moment, as if time itself had paused. And then, in an instant, all restraint dissolved. She ran toward him, arms open, tears streaming freely. Junyong met her halfway, pulling her into an embrace that felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. In that hug, the months of separation, the doubts, and the loneliness melted away, leaving only the warmth of presence, the certainty of belonging, and the unspoken promise that they would face everything together. In the days that followed, they rediscovered the joy of shared routines, the quiet mornings with soft music playing, the long walks through familiar streets, the effortless conversations that could jump from serious reflections to playful banter without missing a beat. Junyong was determined to make up for lost time, not through grand gestures, but through consistent attentiveness, making unravel her favorite meals, leaving small notes of encouragement, and simply being present in ways that spoke volumes. Yunol, in turn, allowed herself to fully embrace the comfort of his presence, trusting that their connection had endured the trials of distance and had only deepened because of them. One evening, they decided to take a late-night drive. Just the two of them, with no destination in mind. The city lights blurred past as they wound through empty streets, the quiet hum of the engine creating a cocoon around them. Junyong reached for Yunol's hand, and she took it without hesitation. "I've missed this," he admitted softly. "Missed being with you like this, even in the silence." Yunol squeezed his hand gently. "I've missed it too. More than I can say." Words were almost unnecessary between them. The connection was palpable, charged with months of longing and the unspoken understanding that they were stronger together. As the weeks passed, Junyong and Yunol faced new challenges, not as obstacles, but as opportunities to grow closer. Work pressures mounted, family expectations demanded attention, and life's unpredictability occasionally threatened to pull them in different directions. Yet, each time they confronted these challenges, they did so together. Communication became their anchor, honest conversations about fears, expectations, and desires, paired with deliberate efforts to support one another. Every compromise, every effort to understand the other's perspective, reinforced the foundation of their relationship. They discovered that love was not simply an emotion to be felt, but a practice to be nurtured. a series of choices made daily to prioritize connection over convenience. One particularly quiet Sunday afternoon, they sat together on the balcony, watching rain streak down the windows. The world outside seemed muted, gray, almost frozen in time, but inside, there was warmth and clarity. Junyong looked at Yunol, tracing the line of her profile with his eyes, and asked, "Have you ever thought about what comes next for us? Beyond all of this?" Nino considered the question, the weight of its implications settling over them. "I have," she admitted, "and I think I want us to build something lasting. Not just days or months, but a life. A life that's ours, full of the little moments, the laughter, the challenges, everything." With you, Junyong felt a rush of relief and elation, the certainty of shared vision anchoring his heart. "That's exactly what I want to," he said, his voice firm, tender, and unwavering. They began to plan in earnest, considering their future with a mix of excitement and pragmatism. Conversations about career moves, living arrangements, and personal dreams were intertwined with discussions about love, trust, and partnership. Each decision was approached not as an individual choice, but as a shared journey, a testament to the deep understanding and respect that had grown between them. And in every conversation, laughter and teasing interwove seamlessly with serious reflection, creating a dynamic that was both comforting and invigorating. Then, one evening, Junyong surprised Yunol with a small, intimate gesture that would mark a turning point in their story. He led her to a quiet rooftop garden overlooking the city. Fairy lights strung above them, soft music playing in the background. Yunol's breath caught at the sight, the effort, the thoughtfulness, the sheer intimacy of the moment. Junyong took her hands in his, looking deep into her eyes. "We've been through so much," he began, his voice steady but emotional. "And through it all, I've learned one thing. I don't want a life without you. I want to face every challenge, every joy, every ordinary and extraordinary moment with you. Will you continue this journey with me, always?" Yunol felt tears prick her eyes, her heart swelling with love and certainty. Without hesitation, she nodded. "Always," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. From that night onward, their bond solidified in ways neither could have predicted. Their relationship was no longer simply about attraction or companionship. It had evolved into a partnership grounded in trust, shared values, and a commitment to nurturing one another's growth. They learned to celebrate victories together, to provide solace during defeats, and to find beauty in the mundane. Even disagreements became opportunities for connection as they practiced patience, empathy, and the art of compromise. Their love had matured into something resilient, capable of withstanding both the smallest irritations and the largest upheavals. As time went on, Junyong and Yunol discovered the power of intentionality in their relationship. They carved out moments just for each other, from quiet dinners to spontaneous road trips, and even simple evenings spent reading side by side. Each moment reinforced their bond, not through spectacle but through presence, attentiveness, and shared experience. The city around them moved in a constant, frenetic rhythm, but within their space, they cultivated a sanctuary of understanding, laughter, and connection that allowed both to thrive. They also learned to navigate life's external pressures with grace. Friends, family, and colleagues often expressed admiration for their closeness. But more importantly, Junyong and Yunol had developed an internal compass that guided their decisions. They relied on each other's perspectives, trusted one another's judgment, and maintained a sense of unity that made challenges less daunting. Even when the world seemed chaotic, they remained aligned, confident that together they could weather any storm. One night, as they sat together on the balcony once more, the city skyline glittering beneath them, Junyong reflected on the journey they had taken. "I never thought love could be this complete," he said quietly. "Not perfect, but whole. You've changed me in ways I didn't know I needed, and I hope I've done the same for you." Anna leaned her head on his shoulder, her hand resting over his heart. "You have," she replied softly. "And you continue to. Every day. It's not about perfection, it's about us choosing each other, every single day." The months turned into years, and their relationship continued to flourish. Each challenge they faced, each milestone they celebrated, became another thread in the tapestry of their shared life. The foundation they had built through patience, communication, and unwavering support allowed them to grow individually while remaining profoundly connected. They understood that love was not static, it evolved, matured, and deepened over time, but the commitment to nurture it remained constant. In the end, Junol's story was not marked by dramatic gestures or fleeting passion, but by the quiet, enduring presence of two people choosing each other consistently. It was in the small victories, the laughter shared over mundane moments, the comfort of being fully known, and the courage to face life's uncertainties together. Their journey proved that true love is not simply found. It is built, day by day, through intention, understanding, and a deep respect for one another. And so, as the city lights twinkled around them and the night settled softly over their shared world, Junyong and Yunol sat together, hands intertwined, hearts aligned. They had faced separation, uncertainty, and the challenges of life. Yet they emerged stronger, more connected, and more certain than ever that they were exactly where they belonged. In that quiet, profound moment, they realized the ultimate truth of their journey. Love is not about avoiding struggle or seeking perfection, it is about choosing each other. Again and again, in the messy, beautiful reality of life. The morning sunlight filtered softly through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the apartment where Junyong and Yunol now lived. There was a quiet serenity in the space, a stillness that spoke of comfort and shared understanding. It had been years since their reunion, yet the intensity of their bond had not diminished. If anything, it had grown, tempered by time, challenges, and unwavering commitment. They moved through their routines side by side, not out of obligation, but out of a deep desire to inhabit life together. Even the simplest moments, pouring coffee, sharing a quiet laugh, reading side by side, felt sacred, imbued with a sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought them here. On this particular day, Junyong had a sense that something important was unfolding. The way Yunol's hair caught the morning light, the way her eyes sparkled even in the soft haze of waking, stirred something in him, a realization that life's true treasures were found in these quiet, intimate moments. He watched her from across the room, his heart swelling with affection, and decided that it was time to take the next step in their shared journey. He wanted to ensure that every challenge they had faced, every tear, every moment of longing, would culminate in a promise-I commitment to a lifetime together. Yunol, unaware of Junyong's inner resolve, moved with her usual grace and ease, her laughter light and unburdened. She had long ago learned that love was not about grand gestures alone, but about presence, consistency, and choice. And yet, she could not help but feel a flutter of anticipation. Something in the air was different, charged with an energy that both excited and unnerved her. She glanced at Junyong, meeting his gaze, and sensed the weight of unspoken emotion. There was an intensity in his eyes that made her heart quicken, a quiet confidence that whatever was about to happen would change their lives forever. Later that evening, Junyong suggested they take a walk along the riverside, a place they had often visited during moments of reflection and intimacy. The city was alive with lights and movement, but the path they walked was peaceful, lined with trees that whispered in the gentle breeze. Each step felt symbolic, a journey not only through the streets of the city, but through the landscapes of their shared memories, joys, and challenges. They spoke softly, their conversation meandering from lighthearted anecdotes to the deep reflections that had become the hallmark of their connection. And with every word, every glance, the anticipation between them thickened, unspoken but palpable. As they reached a small clearing overlooking the water, Junyong stopped, taking Yunol's hands in his. The air between them seemed to pause, as if the world itself had recognized the gravity of the moment. "Yunol," he began, his voice steady but full of emotion. "We've walked together through so much, through distance, uncertainty, and every challenge life has thrown at us. Every step has brought us closer, taught us more about ourselves, and about each other. And I can't imagine taking the next steps without you by my side." Yunol's eyes glistened with unshed tears, her breath catching as the weight and beauty of his words settled over her. Junyong reached into his pocket and drew out a small velvet box. Opening it, he revealed a ring that shimmered in the soft glow of the city lights. "I want to spend my life with you, Yunol," he said, his voice unwavering. "Not just the easy days, but every challenge, every ordinary moment, every extraordinary adventure. Will you marry me?" Yunol felt a surge of emotions, joy, relief, love, and a crashing over her like a tidal wave. Her hand flew to her mouth as tears streamed freely. "Yes," she whispered, the word trembling with emotion, yet firm in its conviction. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." In that instant, the world seemed to expand and contract at once. The city's noise faded into the background, leaving only the two of them, entwined in a moment of pure, unfiltered connection. Junyong slipped the ring onto her finger, and as their hands clasped together, they felt an unspoken understanding settle between them. This was the culmination of every sacrifice, every moment of patience, every challenge that had tested their love. It was proof that love, when nurtured with intention, communication, and trust, could endure anything. The following months were filled with the joyful chaos of planning their life together. They navigated choices with care, balancing practicality with dreams, ensuring that every decision reflected both their shared values and individual aspirations. They laughed over minor disagreements, celebrated small victories, and allowed themselves moments of quiet reflection, understanding that the strength of their bond was found not in perfection, but in authenticity. Friends and family watched their journey with admiration, often remarking on the palpable love and respect that flowed effortlessly between them. Yet, Junyong and Yunol knew that the true measure of their commitment was not external validation, but the quiet, everyday acts of choosing each other. On their wedding day, they stood together under a canopy of white flowers, surrounded by those they loved, yet entirely focused on one another. Yunol's dress caught the sunlight, shimmering softly, while Junyong's eyes reflected a mix of pride, love, and uncontainable happiness. The vows they exchanged were not grandiose or overly elaborate, but they carried the weight of years of shared experiences, challenges, and triumphs. "I promise to choose you, every day, in every moment," Junyong said, his voice resonating with sincerity. "I promise to support you, to challenge you, to grow with you, and to love you without reservation." Yunol's reply mirrored his sentiment, each word a testament to the depth and resilience of their connection. As they shared their first dance, the world seemed to shrink to the space they occupied. Music filled the air, laughter echoed from friends and family, but all that mattered was the rhythm of their hearts, beating in harmony. In each other's arms, they found solace, joy, and an unshakable certainty that they had not only found love, but had created it through every trial, every moment of vulnerability, every choice to remain present for one another. It was a love that was both tender and fierce, gentle and enduring, simple in its expression, yet profound in its impact. The years that followed were not without challenges, but Junyong and Yunol approached life with a shared resilience. Career shifts, relocations, and unforeseen trials tested them. Yet each obstacle was met with communication, understanding, and mutual respect. They celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and milestones with intention, savoring each moment and honoring the journey that had brought them together. Even the mundane became meaningful, as they found joy in routine, comfort in each other's presence, and strength in their unwavering partnership. Children, when they arrived, were welcomed into a home filled with love, patience, and attention. Junyong and Yunol navigated parenthood with the same dedication they had given to their relationship, teaching through example the values of empathy, resilience, and commitment. Laughter filled the home, echoing the joyful cadence of a life built intentionally, while moments of challenge were met with patience, compromise, and mutual support. Through every stage, they remained attuned to one another, ensuring that their bond remained a foundation for the family they had created. As they grew older, Junyong and Yunol often reflected on their journey. They remembered the months of separation, the longing, the challenges that had seemed insurmountable, and the fears that had once threatened to pull them apart. And yet, every recollection was tinged, not with regret, but with gratitude for the resilience it fostered, for the clarity it brought, and for the depth of love that emerged as a result. They had learned that true partnership was not about perfection, but about choosing one another with intention, day after day, through life's unpredictable and often messy terrain. One quiet evening, they sat together on the balcony of their home, overlooking the city as it stretched endlessly into the horizon. The sun was setting, casting golden hues over the skyline, and the air was filled with the faint hum of distant traffic and the whisper of the wind through the trees. Junyong reached for Yunol's hand, holding it firmly but gently. "We've lived so much, and yet I feel like our journey is just beginning," he said, his voice soft but resolute. Yunol smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Every day with you feels like the start of something new, something worth cherishing. And I can't imagine a life without you in it." In that quiet, profound moment, they both understood the truth they had carried through every trial, every joy, and every quiet evening. Love was not about perfection or drama, it was about choosing each other, continuously, with unwavering dedication and full hearts. The finality of their story was not an ending, but a promise that life, in all its chaos, beauty, and unpredictability, could be navigated together with grace, humor, and commitment. Junyong and Yunol had built a love that was resilient, enduring, and transformative. It was a love forged through challenges, solidified in presence, and celebrated in every small and large moment of their lives. And as the night fell, wrapping the city in a quiet embrace, they sat hand in hand, hearts intertwined, ready to face whatever the future held. Confident that together they could withstand anything, and that their love would continue to grow, deepen, and flourish for all the days to come.